You're up next. Jack Hitchener is an adjunct in English.
Adjunct in English, I teach in the ITW program one course called Coming of Age and Peace, and I also teach creative writing. And it's the creative writing in me that has led me to make Jenny's friendship and to bring me actually to what I'm going to talk about. But comparing myself to Tom and to Mike, I feel as if I'm learning how to swim. All right, if that metaphor works for you. I also feel like a bit like Hamlet, and I'll paraphrase Hamlet. Instead of to be or not to be, I'll say to publish in print or to publish online. That's the question. That's the question that I've begun to face. I've been writing for many years, and for many of those years, I wanted to have at least something in print before it became too late, so to speak. And I've been fortunate enough to have two collections of poetry published in print in the past 2 years. One called Not Far From Here, and the other published just last spring called Seasons and Shadows. So in that sense, I've accomplished something that I've always wanted to do. Last fall, a friend of mine who is a novelist, Ernest Hebert, as a matter of fact, urged me to put much of my writing in one space, one repository, you might say. And he said, Jack, Amazon Kindle, consider Amazon Kindle. And I knew next to nothing about Amazon Kindle, and I've been learning as I've gone along. I feel very naive, nonetheless, at this point. So after Ernie spoke to me about this, I considered some of the short stories that I've been working on for over the years, and I've put together a collection of short stories. And I also went to Amazon.com, Kindle Direct Publishing help, because I needed help. All right, I'm still learning. I probably should know more than I do, but that's I'm slow. I like to write rather than, in a sense, work online. So in December, I sought Jenny's help, and she's been very noble, very conscientious about helping me along the way. We were able to put together the book, all right? We followed the directions here. I look at the title, Building Your Book. That's what I did, that's what Jenny helped me with. I saved it in a doc format, Word doc format. But I also learned that we needed to save it in HTML format in order for it to be appropriate for Kindle, Amazon Kindle. So we went through that, and along the way, we made page breaks, spell check, and grammar. I put together a title page, copyright page, front matter, so to speak, and back matter as well. But when it came to format all of this, that's where I encountered trouble. And that's when I took the issues to Jenny, who, again, has been very noble about working things out. As of now, when we put it up on the Kindle model, some of it looked perfect, absolutely perfect. What didn't look perfect was my fault because of what I did not do, I think, and the actual formatting of some paragraphs. The front matter looks fine. The back matter looks fine. Jenny was kind enough to work out an active table of contents for each of the story titles. Punch on the story title, it brings you right to that particular short story. What I still need to do is to mend the paragraphing, the indentations, so to speak, and the spacing between paragraphs and the spacing between the individual short stories. I need to work on that. Hopefully this will be ready in about a month, hopefully less than a month. Meanwhile, why did I do this again? Some of it, I guess, is selfish. I'm not getting any younger, and it takes a long time for an unknown writer to land an agent, to find a publisher who is willing to take on an unknown. So in this case, I eliminate what we know as the middleman, all right? And so that's why, at least for the time being, I'm going to stay with Amazon Kindle. And Mike, I might have some questions for you about the process someday. As it stands now, the product, the collection of short stories, which is called How Far Away, How Near, is still in, let's say, the formatting stage. Meanwhile, I'm doing this again because I'm not getting any younger. Also, to eliminate the middleman, and maybe there's something in there for profit. I don't expect to make a lot of money in this. But as I understand it from some friends of mine who have put their documents on Kindle, if I were to put the price of $2.99 on this collection of short stories, which I'll probably bump down to $1.99 because it is just a collection of short stories, it's not a novel. But as I understand it, I would receive about a 70% profit of each purchase of $1.99. Okay? What I would also have to do would be to create my own publicity. And maybe the two of you know something about that. All I know is I could use email to email friends and colleagues here, email classmates from college and high school. I'm not on Facebook. I don't do Facebook. I may have to do that yet. I may also have to create a website. So to bring this to a close, I know it's fairly short, but that's my story as a creative writer so far. There are things I still need to learn about, especially about the formatting process and about gaining or putting out the word that I have something you may be interested to read on a Kindle. About 2 or 3 years ago, I went to a class reunion, and the wife of one of my high school good friends was promoting a Kindle. She was reading novels on Kindle. She was reading magazines on Kindle. She was subscribing to Amazon Kindle. And I poo-pooed the idea. I guess that was, I don't know if that was snobbish of me or not. It probably sounds snobbish. For years, I've been surrounded by books. I love to hold a book in my hand and page through it. Okay? I still don't own a Kindle. That will change, I'm sure, in the next month or so. But I'm slowly changing my point of view to the world of publishing, which, as you know, is changing big time. And Amazon Kindle, and I think some of the applications that Mike and Tom were speaking of have a lot to do with that.
So I got a general question.
Sure.
Amazon's creation of Kindle, is that just some neo-imperialist thing to create a demand for something that they're producing?
It may be, I don't know.
Why couldn't they just put all that stuff onto computers? I mean, what's the difference? So you got something smaller that you can hold, but laptops are pretty small. So
I think what Mike was bringing out would be something that may, actually Mike and Tom were bringing out, would be something that would certainly be possible one day, to see a collection of poetry on an application, if I'm using the right word, or on an iPod. Judy?
I'm curious about the editing part.
Oh.
Is it iterative in the sense that you can do it online and do your tweaks online, or do you have to like re-upload something, take it down, work on it, put it back up? Or?
What I've done, and what Jenny has helped me with, is we looked at the Word document. All right, before we transferred it to the Amazon Kindle. We made those editorial corrections on the Word document. And then saved it, if my memory is correct, on HTML.
Yeah, we used Contribute to pull all of the Microsoft code, pull the code out, and then republished it as an HTML file.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the formatting was still a little problematic. But I mean, it fixed some things, and then there was a quirk in a paragraph on page 72 or something. So it was.
And the paragraphing right now for most of the document, it seems that the paragraphs are one on top of the other without proper space in between. But that's something that I need to go back to and correct. Does that answer your question, Judy?
That's one of the big lessons I've learned about this, and my wife has learned too in using these, is that you really don't want to get into a situation where in order to check it, you have to get on the device every time. Because I mean, the editing process is just too iterative to be doing that all the time and saying, well, okay, now I made this change, did I screw everything up? And so you've got to, on Word, one of the things I do, because we're trying to put the graphics and everything there, is I'll shrink the margins so that immediately I can see if this graphic is going to displace a whole page worth of text. I know that before we actually do the conversion process. And ideally, and it sounds like what you're basically doing the same thing with the HTML, right? So you're looking at the HTML, and if something doesn't translate into HTML, it's definitely not going to translate into the Kindle, right? Mm-hmm. And so getting some sort of format that can really, where you're spotting 80 or 90% of your problems before the conversion is really key. Otherwise, I think you would drive yourself nuts, absolutely nuts.
I got another general question for all of you. How does this way of publishing, how does it affect your status with your colleagues? If you're a young professor who's seeking tenure or something like that, and you're using this way, you're trying to publish your expertise, is that something that they're going to buy into? Or?
Probably not.